In this week's drive, we get some fresh air, kick up some dust, spray some sparks, and race in a duck. All this and more in this week's drive. A1 Grand Prix, the World Cup of Motorsport, made its first visit to the Estoril circuit just outside Lisbon in Portugal for the third round of this, the first ever season. The opening sprint race lived up to the promise of wheel-to-wheel action. A three-way charge to the first corner with France on the inside, Brazil in the middle and Switzerland on the outside. France braved it out to hold on to the lead. It was a very short-lived race for Australia, Mexico, Austria and Pakistan as they all crashed out on the second turn. It was also to prove the start of a trying day for the British team. Irish driver Ralph Furman touched the right rear wheel of the British entry, causing a puncture, and it was into the gravel and out of the race for Robbie Kerr. Frenchman Alexandre Prémart was unaffected by the scrappy racing behind him and cruised to an untroubled win. In the feature race, India stalled on the warm-up lap and then Brazil's Piquet stalled at the start, impeding Verstappen of the Netherlands, who was right behind him. France led Portugal and the Czech Republic into the first corner, but the safety car was on track as Brazil's car was pushed off the circuit. Ananda Mikala of Team Indonesia got a little too aggressive, trying to overtake Englishman Robbie Kerr approaching turn 1, but the Briton managed to slip by South African Thomas Scheckter in the confusion. When racing resumed, Switzerland's Neil Jani challenged the French car for the lead a second time, only to be thwarted again. Dutchman Verstappen misjudged a passing move and he spectacularly headed for retirement, taking Germany's Adrian Sutil with him. Portuguese racing fans had plenty to cheer about when Alvaro Parente snatched fifth place from Team Australia's Will Davidson in the closing stages. But the final result was never really in doubt. For the third time this season, a driver has gone on to claim a double victory as Prémart steered to an emphatic win.
So I think we have a really good team, the Team Dams for the A1 in France. They did a really good job since the beginning of the year, the beginning of the championship, sorry. And so Nicolas Pierre did a really good job, and me too. So I think this is a really good package, maybe to win the championship. I hope so.
Prémart beat Jani by 7.5 seconds, another second place for Switzerland. It was a first podium for Ireland as Ralph Furman started 19th and finished 3rd, and at last America's Scott Speed scored some points. This is the last European leg for A1 Grand Prix. Next stop is Australia for the 4th of 12 rounds. A huge crowd of 147,000 fans were at Hockenheim for the finale of the 2005 German Touring Car Championship. They were treated to a great race, local hero Bernd Schneider taking advantage of a poor start from pole position by Jamie Green to grab the lead from 3rd on the grid. But most attention was on 24-year-old Englishman and title leader Gary Paffett. Starting 6th on the grid, on lap 2 he got the better of ex-Formula 1 driver Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Audi's reigning champion Matthias Ekström was also charging up the field. He was later disqualified for making only one pit stop. Regulations require that 2 are made. Scottish Formula 1 driver and sports car ace Alan McNish had an incident which let some fresh air into his car. On lap 14, Tom Christensen of Denmark passed Jamie Green for 2nd place, posting the fastest lap. On lap 17, Jean Alesi outbraked himself while trying to pass Frentzen. After the first round of pit stops, which saw Green retake 2nd place, Paffett continued to push the leaders, and on lap 20 he dived inside Frank Stippler for 4th position. On lap 25, race leader Bernd Schneider and Jamie Green both made their 2nd stops. By the 30th lap, Paffett had Tom Christensen in his sights. Under pressure, Christensen floated wide and opened the door for Paffett to grab 3rd place. Frenzen's day didn't get any better, the German coffin maker crashing heavily but without injury. Germany's Bernd Schneider won the race from Britain Jamie Green, but the celebrations were for Gary Paffett, whose third place was enough for him to become the first Englishman to win the DTM Championship, scoring 5 wins and 4 podium finishes in the 11-round season. Second in the championship standings is still Matthias Ekström, 13 points behind, despite being disqualified by race stewards for only making the 1 pit stop. Third is Christensen, ahead of Schneider. What was the best moment of the season for the new champion?
Probably crossing the finish line today. It's you know, we've had some great races this year, but you know, crossing the finish line today, finally being champion, was unbelievable.
Mercedes took a clean sweep of the podium at the final round. Across the Atlantic, the final race of the Indy Racing League season was held in Fontana, California. AJ Foyt IV brought out the first caution of the race with an all-by-himself one-car crash in his final IRL race. The youngster, who will switch to NASCAR's Busch Series beginning next week in Memphis, Tennessee, was taken to hospital after complaining of pain in his knees. He was examined and later released. Many of the cars headed to the pits while the yellow flag was out, and Tony Kanaan got back out in front. Danica Patrick's rookie season ended with a bang instead of the victory that she had hoped for. It was a jarring crash that brought out the 4th and final caution flag just 16 laps from the end of this 200-lap event.
You know, Lazier was driving all over the place all day. I complained on the radio all day that he was, you know, by himself driving all over the place, just trying to, you know, whether he was just kind of lost on the track or trying to cut my hair, I'm not really sure, but, you know, or if that was his line. But, you know, it bit me in the end, and I'm not sure, I haven't seen a replay exactly, but, you know, I'm just driving around the outside, and all of a sudden I'm in the wall. So all I know is I had a problem with him all day.
Each blamed the other for the crash, with Lazier saying Patrick had cut him up in the turn several times earlier in the race and caused the accident with a similar move. The finish came down to a duel between Dario Franchitti and Tony Kanaan, with Franchitti winning by a whisker, just 0.117 of a second, only the 23rd closest finish in IRL history. It was the 2nd victory of the season and the 4th of Franchitti's IRL career, ending what has been a frustrating season on a high note. Series champion Dan Wheldon finished 7th. More than 20,000 people gathered in the centre of Oviedo to pay tribute to their local son Fernando Alonso, the youngest ever Formula One world champion. The crowd, mainly wearing blue and yellow, the colours of both his home region of Asturia and of his team, Renault, packed the city's main square to have a glimpse of their hero. The 24-year-old asked fans to keep their allegiance and led the chorus of thousands of people singing the Asturias anthem. Oviedo has been gripped by Alonso mania since the Renault driver became the first Spaniard to win the Formula One title. Formula One had little appeal in Spain, but Alonso's success provoked an explosion of interest. One fan dressed for the occasion and made maximum noise with his handheld engine and summed up their pride in Alonso's achievement.
He is a phenomenon. He is from Asturia and he has won a title no other Spaniard ever managed. It is something unique.
Alonso began karting at the age of 3, going on to win the Spanish, European and World Junior Championships before switching to cars in 1999, testing for Minardi in 2000. He joined Renault a year later and won his first Grand Prix in Hungary in 2003. Earlier in the day, Alonso, locally known as Nano, also took part in a gathering with 2,500 followers in the Prince of Asturias Foundation, where many had watched him winning the title on big screens. Oviedo has dedicated an exhibition to Alonso, putting on display his helmet, boots and his car. He was asked about the highlight of his title year.
The race after Indianapolis, Magny-Cours, claiming pole was very emotional. And the best moment of the year was yesterday, or maybe today.
And then he was asked if there was anything he wouldn't do again if he were to repeat his career.
Try not to be a test driver for a year, but that is not up to me. That's up to the team chiefs. I don't know, I would repeat everything the same.
Alonso pleased his audience the most by saying he might finish his career without ever wearing Ferrari red. Later, he received the Asturias Award from Prince Felipe and said the tribute he was receiving at home was the ideal way to finish a season. Road traffic has become one of the evils of our age. Despite international concern about climate change from the use of fossil fuels, the demand for cars is rising worldwide and expected to boom in the next decade. So researchers are hotting up on ways to make car engines less harmful, such as using recycled cooking oil as diesel fuel, saving reserves of fossil oil. By filtering and thinning used vegetable oil, researchers at the University of the West of England have produced a fuel that can be run in a standard diesel engine. They hope a larger program of oil recycling and reuse could help fuel the university's fleet of vehicles.
The problem with recycled oil is there's only a finite amount in the environment that we could get hold of. We only eat so many chips in our lives, whereas with pure oil, we've got extensive agricultural land, some of which is currently in set-aside, which could then be devoted to growing crops for fuels.
Oil-bearing crops such as rapeseed could be grown to fuel cars and help consume some carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as they grow. Dr. Shales believes biofuels will be vital as the world's reserves of fossil oil start to run out, just as global demand for fuel is rising.
It's going to help to solve our fuel problems, and there's a very important aspect to this, and that's called peak oil. In the next few years, world production of crude oil is going to peak, and then it's going to start dropping. At the same time, we're going to have increased demand from countries such as India and China. And that's going to create a great pressure on us. Biofuels will be part of the answer.
Research is being carried out at the University of Bath to make the engines themselves cleaner, greener and smarter. Diesels use far less fuel than petrol engines, and modern diesels produce half the emissions of diesel engines made just 7 years ago. In Europe, half of all new cars sold now have diesel engines. Detailed studies of how the engines perform has been the key to making them better.
Diesel engines these days are far more refined than what they were 5-6 years ago, to such a point that they've become actual fuel misers. The miles per gallon that you can get from a diesel engine now, while still retaining good power and while still retaining good drivability, which is what the public wants, have put it in a position where it can compete with the gasoline engine on many fronts. They used to be thought of as dirty and smelly and particularly loud, and that's not so anymore. They're actually very refined, complex machines.
Research at the university includes studying the heat flow inside the engine. For every kilowatt of power produced by modern diesel engines, about 2 kilowatts are wasted. This diesel is fitted with over 100 sensors to map how heat behaves in the piston cylinders. The results will improve the accuracy of the computer models designing a new generation of ultra-efficient diesels. It was yet another victory for Finnish duo Jussi Välimäki and Jarkko Kalliolepo as they celebrated the Rally of Thailand victory. The Finnish duo came into the race already having clinched the 2005 Asia-Pacific Rally Championship last month in Indonesia. They had over 200 kilometres to cover on the last day, but the Finnish duo proved their mettle once again in their maiden APRC season in a race they expected would be competitive.
I expected to be more tight here, but for sure it was, I want to win this rally, and we want to challenge Arai here because we have nothing to lose, and the championship was it. This was our target, and I'm very happy and very pleased about the result.
The Finns clinched the title a few weeks ago, but winning 15 of 16 stages in Thailand solidified their claim to the top spot. The top Japanese drivers were denied victory again. Toshihiro Arai could only manage a distant second to Välimäki, while Katsuhiko Taguchi's day ended in a tree with some admittedly aggressive driving.
I think a little bit too fast. Not little bit, it's much too fast.
The 2005 Asia-Pacific season has now come to an end, but the Rally of Thailand at least gave drivers like Toshihiro Arai something to build on, heading into the World Rally Championship event in Perth in Australia.
Left into -6 right, exit braking and caution dip, exit braking and caution dip. 40, flat crest.
Good practice for Australia because the road is quite fast and quite tricky road, so very good practice, yeah.
Malaysian driver Can Chi Hong and navigator Bernard Chin settled for third over the three-day rally, while fourth went to the Mitsubishi Lancer crew of Jeff Argyle and Jane Black. The MotoGP world title already safely claimed, the main question in Istanbul was whether Valentino Rossi could equal Mick Doohan's record of 12 Grand Prix wins in one season. It didn't go according to plan for Rossi, or for that matter, Sete Gibernau, who slipped past his teammate, early leader Marco Melandri. Gibernau had started the race on pole, Rossi in fourth. Melandri was back in front just 2 laps later as the Spaniard ran into the gravel and saw his chance of winning his first race this season disappear. The Spaniard recovered to eventually claim fourth place. Rossi had started fourth, but the Italian dropped as low as 8th before clawing his way back through the field. By lap 8, he'd overhauled Nicky Hayden for second place. Rossi piled on the pressure over the final few laps, but Melandri held firm to take the checkered flag with a relatively comfortable advantage of 1.5 seconds. The 23-year-old Italian, the 2002 250cc world champion, held on to clinch his first ever MotoGP victory for Honda. He's previously scored 17 victories in the 125 and 250 classes. Rossi was second to spoil a Honda sweep of the top 4 positions, with Hayden third ahead of Gibernau. This was Rossi's 15th podium finish from 16 races this season.
I did a good job after many injuries, many bad luck, and it's unbelievable to come back in this podium at the moment for me.
Rossi will have to wait until the last race of the season in Valencia to try and equal the mark set by Mick Doohan in 1997. The 250 world title had been settled at the previous round in Australia, but that didn't prevent an exciting race, with the champion, Daniel Pedrosa, forced to chase Casey Stoner, who led from start to finish on his Aprilia. But the Spaniard pushed hard, Stoner crossing the line just 1/10 of a second ahead of 3-times world champion Pedrosa on his Honda to score his 5th win of the season, the first Australian to achieve this. Behind them, the battle for third saw Hiroshi Ioma and Alex De Angelis going head-to-head in the late stages of the race. But the San Marinese crashed out on the last corner, rejoining to finish 7th, leaving Ioma to take his 4th podium of the season.
I knew it was him behind me because his team was the only other people holding the pit board out. So, I just pretty much kept my head down, and I knew if I went behind, then I probably wouldn't have a chance to get back past because the left-hand side of my front tyre was just destroyed, and yeah, it wasn't. I wasn't too confident in a lot of the fast corners. But so I pretty much just kept my head down, and for the last lap I just tried to keep everything smooth and brake as late as possible so he couldn't pass me, and everything worked out perfectly. So after a rough weekend, I think we did all right this weekend.
The Japanese rider is now just 12 points off third place in the World Championship standings, currently held by his Honda factory colleague Andrea Dovizioso. Positions 3 to 9 on the ladder can still change. As usual, there was high action in the competitive 125cc race. Hector Galbel and Sergio Gadea departed early, and 6 riders fought at close quarters for most of the race. That was until the last lap, when Mika Kallio regained the lead and promptly lost control, much to the anguish of his pit crew. Less than a second separated the top 5 at the finish line, with 17-year-old Mike De Meglio clinching his first Grand Prix victory. The French Honda rider won, with Italy's Matteo Passini second and Japan's Tomoyoshi Koyama third. Despite Kallio's crash, KTM continued to lead the Constructors' Championship with a lead of 13 points over Honda. With his 5th place finish in Turkey, Thomas Luthi of Switzerland needs only 2 more points from the season ender in Spain to secure the title. Finishing 14th or better would do it for the teenager. To Sweden now, where they take road safety so seriously they have contests between emergency service crews to see who can do the job quickest. These competitions on simulated car crashes let crews see what they might be up against with new model cars which may be involved in collisions. The exercises also allow the crews to practice their communications and extraction techniques for vehicle passengers with a variety of injuries. Perhaps not surprisingly, Volvo is one of the main sponsors and works closely with the rescue service organisation in Sweden.
When they train normally, they can see a little bit a part of everything, and they train on that part, and now they can see the whole thing. And they have the opportunity to get new ideas, new ways of doing things, and I think they learn a lot.
For the teams, the competitions offer the opportunity of developing new solutions and practicing difficult situations under safe conditions.
We want to compete because competing makes us practice a lot, and if we practice a lot we get better to do this for real.
Which is the most difficult sort of situation?
I guess nobody wants to get out there and find a car on the roof. And to be able to get into the patient is very difficult when it's on the roof. Maybe there are other cars blocking the entrance and stuff like that. So on roof it's not good. And the patients in a car that's on the roof are usually badly injured.
The competition is also an opportunity for Volvo's engineers to gain valuable experience.
Yes, we can use it. We have get information and their opinion, the rescue workers' opinion about cars and how the rescue work should go, and that we can bring back to the design office and use it in the future cars.
Of course, all this would be unnecessary if we could eliminate collisions in the first place. And finally, the streets of Riga were turned into a mixture of a racetrack and an art gallery recently, as pedal car racers pitched both their mechanical expertise and their creativity against each other. All the participants of the Cartoon Go-Kart Rally were given the same framework for their vehicles. It was then up to them to create a masterpiece. With 2 months to prepare, the only conditions were that the vehicle would be moved by pedal power alone. Some of the more attractive vehicles were the Cloud, the Ship, and the Double Bed, whose driver even designed a co-driver.
A navigator should be in each rally team. There is a pilot, and the other is a navigator, and she is the navigator. It's a map below there, which she reads.
Rally participants says it takes a good 2 weeks to prepare both themselves and the vehicles for the race. None of the cars would have got by the fussy Formula One scrutineers, but there's no doubt that just as much passion and ingenuity went into the design process. The driver and designer of the Arrow insists all aspects of the design are taken into consideration.
Everything is well considered. It is why we have a pointed front piece as an arrow, so we could split the airflow, so as to be the fastest, the best, the most safe, the most clever.
While there's no actual winner of the racing aspect of the rally, beyond actually competing the course more or less intact, members of the crowd voted for their favourite, and it seems it was the Cloud that found the most appreciation.
That one's a good car.
Most Formula One drivers started out racing karts, perhaps not quite so heavily decorated, and with a little more in the engine room. So, whether you're racing off into the kitty litter, cutting up your car, or just getting more than a helping hand, so you stay on track and up to speed, make sure you catch next week's Drive.